What was odd about Antarctica? On first glance, it looks like it has nothing. Just plain white, an empty sprawl of frozen stillness that goes on farther than the imagination can reach. But underlying that chilly nothingness is something much more bizarre. Odd shapes, buried formations, and enigmas that no one can really explain have persisted in scientific studies for decades. And consider the fact that Earth has been hit time and again by comets and asteroids, some scars so enormous that only satellites can see them. The likelihood of there being hidden evidence of cosmic catastrophes in Antarctica grows more than reasonable. Few know there is a colossal crater hidden under the ice, one so massive that its proportions compare to some of the biggest impact craters found on our planet. That's where the tale turns. Because when Chinese researchers first started drilling into Antarctica's icy crust, what they found challenged everything we've ever believed. Their shocking finds didn't just clutter up the pages of academic journals, they sparked an international debate, and caught the attention of scientists, doubters, and even Joe Rogan's massive global following. What started as typical climate research quickly became a scientific shockwave, rewriting the history of Earth's chilliest frontier and leaving us to wonder, what exactly lies beneath the ice, and why is nobody in power discussing it? If this kind of story touches your heart, if you're someone who cares about truth, responsibility, and speaking up for the voiceless, please like this video, subscribe to our channel Spark Science, and share it with someone who should hear it. Let's get started. Antarctica has captivated adventurers forever, but over the past few decades, no country has chased its secrets with greater ambition than China. Within a few brief years, China went from virtually no Antarctic presence at all to building several research stations, drilling into ice sheets tens of thousands of years old, and subtly accruing a mighty voice among the world's Antarctic leadership. The change wasn't just quick, it was deliberate, strategic, and maybe even sinister. How fast, how precise, and how ambitious China has climbed the icy continent has made many suspect what they're really seeking. Is it just science, or is there something more buried in the frozen dark? The story began back in 1980, when Australia extended an invitation to Chinese scientists to visit Antarctica. At that time, China's interest in polar exploration was minimal, but the trip planted a seed. Only 4 years on, in 1984, China sent out its own Antarctic expedition, opening what would be a concerted campaign that would soon set them on the same platform as the US, Russia, and other traditional powers with extended polar histories. They did not hesitate to leave their mark. China constructed the Great Wall Station in 1985 on King George Island, a harsh, windswept region in the South Shetland Islands. This was no token gesture. It was working, functional, and intended to last. From there, Chinese scientists started exploring Antarctica's weather patterns, oceanic currents, and biology. Soon enough, they pushed further inland with the Zhongshan Station, providing them access to remote, unexplored land. These stations weren't simply research camps. They were geopolitics. China had arrived and wasn't leaving. China played the diplomatic long game. They entered the Antarctic Treaty System, which prohibited military use and fostered peaceful scientific collaboration. In 1985, they were granted consultative party status, which provided them with a vote and voting rights in deciding how Antarctica was to be governed. This was no small thing. It meant China was no longer on the outside looking in. They were now a permanent player at the Antarctic table. During those initial years, their work seemed subdued, nearly uneventful. They worked with electromagnetic signals in the air, followed krill, and recorded sea currents. However, behind the scenes, their aspirations were far from run-of-the-mill. Joe Rogan, in his podcast, frequently wonders, if it's just ice, why are so many nations locked in there? It's a reasonable question. The massive investment of time, money, and manpower put into Antarctica alone indicates that something more is up. And with an eye to China's swift development, 2 behemoth stations in 10 years, followed by huge tech investments, you can't help but wonder they were onto something everyone else either underestimated or didn't want to know about. The mystery has only been deepened by China's secrecy. While Western countries often shout out discoveries, China's Antarctic exploits are unusually low-key. Still, over the 1990s and into the future, they just kept expanding, collaborating with Japan on collaborative research, and imbibing decades of knowledge from older powers. By the early years of the millennium, China was no longer a freshman on the ice. They were a player. And then came the initial blockbuster revelation, one which at first seemed bizarre but proved to be revolutionary. It wasn't discovered in radar imagery, seismic surveys, or satellites. It was discovered in penguin dung. In 2000, Chinese geochemist Sun Luang released a paper in the journal Nature that revolutionized climate science forever. By examining fossilized guano from penguin colonies, his team constructed a 30,000-year record of climate. Penguin droppings, deposited over the centuries in silent layers, had quietly preserved chemical records of diet, food availability, and climate conditions. By analyzing such constituents as phosphorus and copper in the frozen layers, researchers pieced together the building and collapsing of penguin populations, and therefore the well-being of Antarctica's ecosystem. The findings were astonishing. Penguin populations increased during warm times when food resources flourished, but plummeted during cold periods when they disturbed ocean circulation. What had sounded like a crazy zoological research project became a serious instrument for studying climate change. For the first time, China had given the world an ecological record stretching back thousands of years, demonstrating how closely ecosystems were connected with temperature changes. If penguins had succumbed to gentle, natural warming episodes, how would modern-day penguins fare in our fast pace of human-induced climate change? The response was sobering. But penguin dung was just the tip of the iceberg. In 2004, China embarked on its most ambitious Antarctic endeavor to date, drilling into Dome A, one of Earth's coldest and most isolated regions. At this altitude, where temperatures fall below -58 degrees Fahrenheit and oxygen is perilously thin, Chinese expeditions drilled beneath the ice to retrieve cores. These cryogenic cylinders are time capsules that freeze microscopic history of Earth's atmosphere for hundreds of thousands of years. The deeper they drilled, the earlier in time they traveled. By 2009, they had pulled out an 800-meter core. Then, in 2019, something remarkable happened. A continuous subglacial sample drilled through 200 meters of hard ice, employing equipment they designed and built themselves. Unlike most countries, which have to import deep drilling technology, China did it themselves. This was not just science. It was a statement. China was no longer lagging behind. They were pioneering. And what did the cores show? Chilling realities. They established that our planet has experienced sudden climate fluctuations in the past, with seas rising several meters at times in unexpectedly brief time periods. But the frightening aspect is this: ancient changes occurred over a span of thousands of years. Now, such shifts are occurring in just decades. The ice not only murmurs warnings but screams them. And China was one of the first to bring that message in the 21st century. However, China's aspirations did not end with climate. Below almost 2 miles of ice, they discovered one of our planet's most bizarre secrets, the Gamburtsev Mountains, a secret range as big as the Alps, lying in silence for millions of years. Seismic imaging and radar mapped valleys and ridges that had never felt the sun by Chinese teams. These were no random formations. They were tectonic collision scars more than 1 billion years old, locked away beautifully beneath Antarctica's frozen burial ground. It redrew the map of Earth's crust. But it also begged pressing questions. If the bedrock of Antarctica is broken by ancient fault lines, then when the ice melts, huge glaciers will rush more quickly into the ocean, speeding up the rise in sea levels above what present models forecast. That is, the ghost mountains could be the solution to the Earth's future. This is where Joe Rogan's interest comes in. On several podcast episodes, Rogan has leaned into the mysteries of Antarctica, from the ancient maps that allegedly show an ice-free shore to Operation High Jump, the enormous 1946 U.S. military mission that conspiracy theorists argue was more than simply testing equipment. Rogan's reflex is straightforward: closed doors always cover up something. And Antarctica, closed by the Antarctic Treaty of 1959, is the largest closed door in the world. Whether in tales of explorers such as Colin O'Brady pulling sleds across the icy desert or arguments with Graham Hancock over lost civilizations, Rogan has maintained Antarctica in the public consciousness. He presents it as a terrain where science and myth intersect. And in that sense, that is fitting for China's discoveries. Penguins and poop might sound absurd, but they uncovered important truths. Ice cores can be dull, but they cautioned us regarding our future. Concealed mountains can be non-essential, but they might determine how rapidly coastlines get submerged. When you pull it all together, China's Antarctic legacy is flags, stations, geopolitics, and a whole lot more. It's data. Cold, hard data that tells us the truth about our planet's past and warns us about its future. They've taught us that ecosystems crumble as warming speeds up. They've demonstrated that sea levels can rise quicker than anyone predicted. They've charted the unseen skeleton of a continent that might determine how humanity adapts, or doesn't adapt, to climate change. So what's the real mystery of Antarctica? It's not UFOs or secret Nazi bases. It's that the continent itself is screaming warnings through ice, stone,